Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our next session during Big Data Days 2024. We're slowly but surely moving towards the end of the conference, and this is actually our last breakout session already. And as the saying goes, we save the best for last. And I'm therefore extremely excited to join us with us today, Karthikeyan Ilangovan, who is the head of business intelligence at Neiman Marcus, and he's presenting today from Dallas, Texas. Karthikeyan is a distinguished expert in data analytics and business intelligence solutions with 15 years of experience in leveraging emerging technologies within Fortune 100 companies, including Capital One, Altis, JP Morgan Chase, and Neiman Marcus, and all of that to transform them into data-driven enterprises. Additionally, he's a seasoned big data professional as well as an ambassador, helping companies monetize data, establish analytic centers of excellence, and transition from data-informed to data-driven organizations. Over the past decade, he has led teams in business insights, quant strategy, analytics infrastructure, data governance, data ops, product management, intelligent automation, and many other aspects. Beyond the corporate world, Karthikeyan is committed to giving back to the community, sharing his expertise through articles, speaking at conferences, leadership roundtables, hackathons, and mentoring. He currently serves as a board member and technology and research director at ESAL, empowering STEM professionals to actively engage with local communities and shape government policies. He also serves on the advisory board for the University of Wisconsin's computer science program, collaborating with the Dallas Innovation Advisory Council, and he is a technology writer and guest author for various publications. Karthikeyan, you can see why we're so excited to have you here with us during Big Data Days. I also think that you have chosen a very excellent topic, which is very current and something that I'm quite sure our audience would like to learn a lot about. The floor is yours, and I really look forward to your session.
Thank you for having me. It's really humbling to be on this session. And then I have an interesting topic that's saved for the last. It's generative AI that everybody is talking about. And then we'll talk a little bit on how it's going to enhance the self-service analytics and how it's going to help bridge the data literacy gap. So without further ado, let's dive into the session to learn a little bit more about how companies implement GenAI strategy, especially to advance their analytics maturity. And then we'll look at some of the nuances, and then we will look at some practical applications. So I'm going to lay out the contents, the agenda for today. Of course, we will dive deep into the fundamental strategy, the core key priorities, the latest trends, and the application of Gen AI in data analytics. But let me start with a little bit of an introduction. Again, Gen AI doesn't need any introduction. It's there everywhere, from customer service to chatbots to software coding and content creation, right? Like, hey, for the Instagram, for the Facebook, for writing, technical publications, Gen AI is kind of encroaching everywhere. The market seems to be booming. It's close to $1.3 trillion estimated by 2032. That's a huge number. But again, like any new technology, there is always a conundrum, there is a bottleneck, and we will look at the interesting facts, why and what's of it in the next upcoming slides. But I just wanted to give you a peek into what we might be experiencing. And in terms of generative AI and kind of getting into the world of data analytics, I would call it like generative BI, because the business insights world has always been thriving with like insights from data, going beyond the numbers and charts. It's telling compelling stories how the organization is doing and how kind of like, hey, it's maturing towards like, running kind of like a self-sufficient, self-service organization. Again, the grassroots of generative BI can be found in like large language models, chatbots, customer service apps, But if business has been leveraging more into the data aspects of it, that's the interesting part. Again, Gen AI is nothing new. Artificial intelligence has been in the works from the 50s, right? Ever since you have the golden age of science fiction, Alan Turing, including his research on like machines, right? Can machines really think? From his research work on like computers and how it can think like humans, AI has come a long way in the last like 70 years. And if you think of it, right, AI is the core foundation of it is automation, right? And you can go back to ancient times, right? In the Greek 1400 BCs from Leonardo da Vinci's famous automations. The whole concept has been there for hundreds of years, but the maturity has been like the learning curve, and then the kind of the wide scale adoption has been much more visible in the last few years, and the core foundation has been like enhanced and then fine tuned over the last few generations. Again, let's pull no punches here, right? Companies are not data deficient. You're flush with data, but again, it's always like, hey, you are like deprived or broke when it comes to actionable insights, right? So we will see how Gen AI is going to change the whole space, because when it comes to large organizations, right, from my experience, they have a large budget. They can throw an army of analysts at a problem, whereas the small and medium business, they don't have the luxury of doing it, right? That's where I think the Gen AI can be a game changer altogether, right? Because hey, you don't have to have a large budget to be able to augment and support your business, and then you can be able to still be able to produce a large amount of data and insights, to cater to your business based on like augmenting it with Gen AI models, out of the box solutions, and kind of visualize this, right? You enter a room, you're able to state a problem, and then you're handled a tailored report within minutes. Again, this is not science fiction. This is what I call the future of generative BI, right? Again, I'm not glorifying spreadsheets. It's completely an autonomous analytics powerhouse. That's what I would call, right? Like, let's say you're able to talk to the model. How effective is my marketing spend in customer acquisition, right? And you get a bounty of insights within minutes and continually updated business strategy. That's the future, how it's going to look like, right? And to provide some examples, here on the screen on the left, it's like kind of like a funny rendition of like how the modern world have looked differently if we didn't have the automations that are the core foundation, right? So before the invention of AutoCAD, you have to basically stencil, work your designs, and then it's a laborious manual work. And then if, let's say, the requirements change, and then like, hey, the design needs to change for whatever reason, the engineers have to scratch it off and then sketch over all over again, right? So this is how it looked in the 80s before the AutoCAD was invented, right? So the AutoCAD kind of revolutionized the whole design world, helped automate things, and then deliver things at a scale. So that's the main thing that Gen AI is going to do for data analytics, right? It's going to help deliver things at a scale, at a faster pace. And some of the insights here that shows truly that's where it's leading to, right? Because from Dun and Bradstreet's and IBM's research, it shows like, hey, business users are using data 16 times a day to make decisions, right? Hey, these are like just high level kind of research numbers. It could be a lot more, depending on like which organization, where they are in the analytical maturity, the size, scale, and then the industry as such, right? Because like medical research, healthcare, they have a lot more appetite with the data and analytics and insights. So you could see a fairly higher strategy and game as we progress to different industries. And then like, hey, still business leaders feel like we don't have the technology in place to take full advantage of the data, right? And then AI is what, from Business Insider's research shows, like it's going to drive cost savings up to the tune of $390 billion across like insurance, front office, back office by 2030, right? So, that's like, hey, another 6 years, you could see a lot more cost savings. The primary thing is like automation, like, getting the process handled by AI. So you augment things when and where you can so that you kind of save cost and drive efficiency through it. So that's all the interesting tidbits about what is Gen AI, and what's the latest in terms of what Gen AI offers. So now let's break into what is specifically Gen AI means in terms of data and analytics, right? And the key strategy here is like, hey, you've all been there, done that. Being an analyst or like, data SME or like a business champion or like a data leader, you all find the same problem where like, hey, there's garbage in, garbage out, right? You could never get enough of that code because like, hey, the amount of data that we have, in order to be able to fine tune, look at what's the usable data, be able to data, process, and then get to insights. You all need clean data, right? So that's the core foundation, I believe, in terms of getting Gen AI in data and analytics. So for that, one of the core concepts that I believe any organization should have is an analytics center of excellence, right? Because what COE is, it's not just a physical or virtual knowledge concentration, existing expertise, resources in a discipline, or the capability to attain the successful performance value, right? It's like a combination of everything, right? So it's the bread and butter of any organization. Data, right? Data is, you see the analogy, right? Data is the new oil. Data is the oxygen for every organization, which oftentimes is very, very true and candid, right? It's the power of decision making, right? From strategy to, operational insights to more of a tactical decisions. This is why data is so important to an organization's success, right? It kind of fuels your organization. It fuels everything, right? So one of the biggest mistakes business can make on its journey towards data competency is like overlook the people and the process behind the data, right? So you have to have a data source somewhere. You have to have a process to source the data somewhere. There is like business logic that governs the data. And there is like, hey, there is like, a point of sale system that actually does the transaction, which is the process, which helps you build the data, right? And then goes through the data pipeline, acquisition, data cleansing, like, semantic layer, getting into the analytics layer, and then getting the whole insights out of it, right? But the key is people and the process. And then it's like, hey, McKinsey did a survey a few years ago where like, hey, companies, what's the importance of analytics and adoption, and what's the common practice, and then they found that fewer than 20% have maximized the potential of achieving analytics at a scale, right? So this is kind of the core foundation. When you want to build Gen AI on top of an analytics, I believe you should have an analytics center of excellence, right? So obviously you see the analytics maturity curve that everybody talks about, right? Hey, you have the foundational pieces, you have the descriptive, analytics where like, what's happened, and and then you move towards diagnostic where you see why it happened. That's the cap for most organizations where like, hey, they lack the capability in terms of process understanding, data understanding, the tools, and then the whole infrastructure, right? So to move towards predictive, prescriptive, and more of a cognitive analytics, and then strategy, you need to be able to have an analytics COE, right? That's your confidant to provide advice, support, training, partnership, everything in between, right? That's the whole key here. So moving on, right? So we all now know that Analytics Center of Excellence, or I like to call it ACE, is the key towards building a foundation for Gen AI in data and analytics. So couple of key jargons that you would have heard day in day out when people talk about Analytics Center of Excellence, that helps drive collaboration, communication framework to deliver all these results, right? So one of the key things that most people talk about in terms of the COE is data democratization and self-service analytics. So let me share my insights as to what these two matter, right? And then you see the picture on the left, that's exactly what it is. But I'm going to give you a little bit more nuance, right? Again, people think like, hey, data democratization means data access, which is not entirely true, right? Again, with data democratization, you get faster insights, deeper discovery, there's less burden on centralized teams like IT, increased data literacy, and so on and so forth, right? But again, why it is not simply data access, right? So the reason being data democratization is not just like access, it's an ongoing process where you kind of enable everybody in the organization, irrespective of like, hey, their technical know-how, their work with data, whether they're comfortable with it, they're confident with the data, and whether they're making informed decisions about the data. It's building the customer experience, the team's experience and the organization's experience centered around data, right? Organization can truly want to be democratized by data, but they need to embrace some of the principles, right? So employees needs to be comfortable around asking data related questions, right? They need to be empowered with the right tools to enable everybody to work with data, and then the overall culture, right? Organization needs to perceive data democratization as an ongoing process, right? Let's say you give access to data to finance and then that be the end of it, then that's not data democratization, right? They need to be able to understand the data, have like a Wikipedia to know what this data means, data definition, data catalog, understand how to use this data, because data can take many forms, right? When you refine it to provide insights, you need to understand what this data beholds, right? What does like this metric definition means? What does the key performance indicator or KPI means? So that's the core things that are the philosophies behind Analytics Center of Excellence. And then how do you enable data democratization? One of the key pieces is self-service analytics, right? Being able to self-service your data discovery, your insights, your visualization, your presentations, and then your executive strategy, your operational strategy, and then the actual delivery of your business outcome. So all these are tied to self-service analytics, which is the key foundation to enable a data democratization, right? So you might ask, how does Gen AI play into all these, like very technical, and also like, hey, these jargons that like, hey, it's kind of interchangeably used across the industry. But my key belief is these are the key foundation for us to be able to get to the Gen AI for the next level. And then how can you use Gen AI to manage and democratize data? It's going to handle a lot of things, right? From automation to handling growing data challenges. It's going to help a lot in data preparation. We all know, right? Whether you're Excel savant or you're an expert in data visualization tools, a lot of time goes in preparing data, right? It's not just the sourcing, having this data automated. You have to be able to cleanse the data, massage the data scaffold, and then prepare the data that's usable for these tools to be able to visualize data, right? So automating a lot of these where you have the data preparation in an automated fashion, it's going to help the generative AI and like the whole insight delivery going at a scale. Obviously, natural language processing and user-friendly interfaces are going to help like users to be able to chat with the data. Synthetic data generation for like models and analysis, it's going to come in handy. Gen AI is going to help build application for non-technical users, right? Of course, we all have out-of-the-box solutions for data governance, data catalog, data lineage analysis, but some of these applications that are user-centric, that's going to come out of Gen AI. Again, translating data, right? The whole data knowledge, that's where Gen AI is going to come in, where like, hey, you don't have to search through documents, even if you have like a data catalog tool. Oftentimes, finding things gets hard, right? And you search for a specific data, then you get like tens and hundreds of results. Then you need to be able to shuffle through it, find out what's more relevant and pertinent to your business problem, and then include it in the solution. So it's going to help translate the data to layman terms, integrating Gen AI with data visualization. I see a lot of companies are getting into that because that's going to bridge the gap in terms of like these like data discovery, data governance, data literacy, and all packaged tool for small, medium, and large business organizations. And again, one of the biggest things that is going to be helpful is identifying and mitigating bias in data, right? Again, we all heard it, right? Policy and data bias. It's two huge things when you talk about how Gen AI is going to affect data and analytics. And then obviously it's going to help you move from descriptive, diagnostic, predictive to prescriptive analytics, right? Get into the analytical maturity. So again, this is the core pieces in the building blocks of analytics center of excellence, and I believe these needs to be set solid before we include Gen AI to the whole mix. Let me talk about two more foundational pieces that's going to be key in terms of Gen AI. Again, we heard in business users, data leaders, and C-level executives always talk about data literacy and data quality, right? Gen AI is no exception. Both these are key priorities and key items for Gen AI as well, right? Again, garbage in, garbage out, right? Like I said earlier, right? It 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 holds true, right? If an enterprise has high data literacy, they can speed things up to sustainably build and deliver analytics, right? So the common denominator in all these is the data quality, right? So a lot goes on between user request, interpretation of the question, and how the response is generated, right? And then a lot can go wrong too, right? How a response is communicated back to the users, regardless of which path you take, the business pursues, the primary limiting factor you will face in today's world is the data quality, right? And then the old adage remains too, right? Garbage in, garbage out. The reason this is more pertinent to the Gen AI, there are a couple of things here, right? One is the Gen AI consumes data at a whole new level, right? The whole new level of speed, scale, and complexity, right? Data and operations team, managing traditional business use cases, right? Focus on curating data, cleansing defined data sets, right? And then we be able to consume it to presentations, visualizations, memos, and things like that. Gen AI is taking it to the new level where it consumes structured, unstructured data alike. It doesn't look at like a curating, defining data sets. It's kind of getting into like a consuming vast amount of data at a scale, and including some data types that most business do not actively manage, right? So getting the data defined and having the data quality defined, and establishing data quality standards, data profiling, having the data governance framework, and then utilizing data quality tools. All these goes a long way in terms of your output from Gen AI, right? That's where more companies already have like a data stewardship team, a data governance team. You have clearly defined data owners, but it's a continuous monitoring improvement. It's a continuous process, right? And it's a continuous feedback mechanism with the learning model, right? It is true because, like, hey, if your data catalog is outdated, if your data governance framework is outdated, then again, you're taking a big hit on the data quality. There is another aspect where Gen AI uses data to generate insights. It might be unpredictable, right? Because I'm like, hey, you already seen, like, hey, when there is like an executive presentation to the board or like your C-suite, you validated the data, you generated insights with the dashboard, you validated your upstream data quality, and still you do another round of validation on your final reports and dashboards before it goes out to the executives or to the street, right? Especially when you're a public company reporting numbers to the street, to you being extra careful to validate it, like 10 different times. That is what we do in terms of like the human involvement in terms of data validation, data quality checks. But Gen AI has some of these capabilities, but again, it depends on what you feed, right? So the whole data quality is like super emphasized in this scenario where, like, hey, you need to have like a good governance framework that is like continuously monitored and improved, and that's the only way for Gen AI to be able to successfully be implemented in an organization. Again, another key concept is building a data literacy. I believe, right, whether Gen AI or not, this is the bedrock of any enterprise analytics, right? Again, people need to understand what's data. They need to be able to be comfortable with the data. They need to be comfortable with the tools, the infrastructure, and the technical jargons behind data, how to be able to consume, and then everybody should know the six elements of data quality, right? We've seen it often too many times where business comes in, they talk about, hey, there is an issue with their report, or there is an issue with the next level as their data. Again, oftentimes they talk about data, but they don't know what to represent in terms of like, hey, it's lacking data quality. What is the issue, right? Whether it's the completeness of the data, whether it's timeliness of the data, and whether it's the data integrity or the consistency. So business needs to be enabled to understand what is data, what's the quality of data, right? And often too many times you see business come back saying, like, with simple terms like, hey, there's something wrong with the data, but they're not explain what is wrong, right? And often too many times you've seen, like, hey, when you built like an executive report for a monthly report for the executives, and business comes back saying, like, hey, I need this data refreshed every hour. So if the business is the executive and operations team is going to use it, like, let's say once a month, why do you need to be refreshed every hour, right? So understanding the data aspects, what's and whys and who's, and then the data quality elements is critical. And that's where the data literacy program comes in, where you upskill your teams, the organization, in terms of learning your data, right? And then one of the key things that I've done over and over again is like define user personas. That helps go a long way, right? There are data avoiders who are like reluctant to change. There are data newcomers or newbies who are like new to data, right? It could be even sometimes like, hey, people who worked in the industry, who were years together, and they're like, hey, I'm on the data side now. I'm like curious to know and understand the data and things like that. So they fall into the data newbie, and then there is data apprenticeship, kind of like a role that are like who are like enablers, helping get into the next level. And obviously there are data gurus, right, who are the savants, who are the business champions, who help drive us for the cost of like the whole data literacy, data quality, and then the pieces of the analytics center of excellence. So having your organization define these personas help elevate the game for the data governance, and then helps with the data literacy program, right? And then one of the other key aspects that's not on the slide is the security, privacy, consent, and then the whole process where like, hey, this needs to be defined for Gen AI to work successfully, right? That's part of every organization, right? Whether it's Gen AI or not, security framework, privacy concerns, legal requirements, and the whole regulatory piece of it, right? So that's unsaid things that you have to still look into when you're implementing Gen AI. Okay, we talked about the core foundation pieces, what is essential in order to build Gen AI in the sphere of analytics and data. So let's talk about what are the latest trends we have in terms of data and analytics. And then this was the Google survey a couple of months ago, where it identified through research and talking, with like executives and organizational leaders. And this is the insights that we got. So the top five data and AI trends for 2024. So when you talk about the Gen AI and data and strategy, again, each organization has a different need, a different level, but this is like an overall trend across the industry where Gen AI is going to speed the delivery of insights across the organization, right? Like I mentioned earlier, that is true. That still holds true because this is going to accelerate automation in a lot of things that you never imagined. And then that's going to speed up the delivery of insights, right? From proof of concept to the path to production. It's going to immensely speeding up things, and then insights will be delivered at scale. That's why Gen AI is going to help elevate the analytics center of excellence. And in the future, you might need an analytics center of excellence for Gen AI too. That's how it's going to elevate the game. And then the role of data analytics and AI will blur. It's kind of true where already you see data analysts are doing a little bit of data science work, data scientists are doing a little bit of data engineering work, and then you see business can't get enough of IT, so they are building their own analytics teams. We are often, too many times we've seen this case with like finance and marketing you know can't deliver at a scale with the help of IT, and they start building their own business insights team. So the role of like business analyst, data engineer, data scientist is already kind of blurry right now, and AI is going to just like speeden things up. There's no surprise there. And AI innovation, right? Like I said, it's going to be strongly hinging on data quality, data governance, and the whole analytics center of excellence. So Google's trend also validates the same. It's also hinges on a strong data governance. Operational AI, operational data will unlock Gen AI potential for enterprise apps. That is true because one of the things that any organization needs is the whole operational piece of it, right? The survey says like 71% of the organization plans to use database integrated with Gen AI capabilities, right? So what do organizations want from AI powered databases, you may ask, right? It helps seemingly connect to AI models, the ability to ground the large language models with techniques like RAG, the ability to scale the database, right? Administration is another part where like, hey, You don't have to spend countless hours trying to administer these things, setting up policies, setting up checks and balances. All these things are going to be elevated at the operational front with Gen AI, right? And then the last one is 2024 will be the year of rapid data platform modernization. This is 100% right for the fact that a lot of the organizations are still using outdated infrastructure. The survey shows hey, only 5% of the organization are satisfied with the legacy database, right? Because there are things that are absolutely true on this one, because the legacy platforms on-premise, they are not enabled for AI, right? There's a lot of room for improvement. The latest modern cloud tools and technology offer a lot more in terms of integration, in terms of automation, in terms of being able to customize things and integrate with AI models. And the legacy platforms don't offer that, right? So there is a need for rapid data modernization, right? Because that's the key towards getting to the new level, right? In order to enable insights at a pace, you need to be able to have infrastructure that can scale. So major cloud platforms like Snowflake, Databricks, and visualization tools on the cloud like Power BI, Tableau already have modern infrastructure on the cloud that you can scale. You can upgrade your servers at a rapid pace. You don't have to be tied to specific schedules in order to be able to monetize the data that you need, right? So that's the key. So 2024, as you see, organizations see the value of Gen AI, try to adopt. One of the key things is going to be updating, the data platforms. So the data modernization seems more relevant in 2024 than ever. Let's look at a couple of use cases in terms of Gen AI in analytics, right? Again, we all seen where marketing and sales and finance, they are the first adopters for generally most of the companies in terms of data in insights, right? So Gen AI is going to just fuel that, and it's going to give a super boost. Synthetic data generation is going to be another one where hey, you need it's the need of the hour, where you need to have that capability enabled in order to take your insights to the next level. Embedded intelligence, that is true. Every tool right now has some kind of Gen AI out of the box embedded into the tool, right? As simple as you've seen, hey, you go to what do you call a travel booking software. It gives you options, recommendations. This is not new, right? You've seen it external platforms, and you're going to see the same into, let's say, a project management tool where hey, you look at first thing in the morning, hey, what is my project schedule, what is going to look like. The intelligence in the tool itself is going to give you hey, this is a Gantt chart view of the project's next a month, 3 months, 6 months. It's going to give you the natural language capability to be able to interact with it, to look at your projects, timelines, key stakeholders, and so many metrics just beyond that, right? So you will see the Gen AI being embedded into applications, far and wide. So that's going to be a use case that already you see in customer service applications, personalization, right? When you're shopping for things, like how Amazon recommends, hey, or you're based on your shopping trend, look at what are similar products that other users buy. So you're going to see it in internal applications within the company. It's going to reach far and wide. And then data visualization. This holds true We've seen this happen, like the last year or two, where companies are bringing in that natural language capability, easy interaction with the data, and then to be able to generate insights, right? Based on the data. So this will be a game changer because you don't have to know build wireframes, spend countless hours trying to build like a pixel perfect dashboards. It's going to help guide your organization to a whole different level. Data cleansing, anomaly detection, again, it comes to all those data quality parameters. This is going to be a game changer in that zone. And data set optimization for analysis, right? This is one of the key components of the data preparation, right? Like I mentioned, we spend countless hours trying to build the data set, prepare data set, go beyond like that, doing semantic layer, right? For specifically for operations, supply chain, like finance and sales. So that kind of like creating the data set, data preparation, optimization, and then that semantic layer and analytics layer. That's what Gen AI is going to help alleviate a lot of the pain points that we have currently right now. So let's talk about what you have here on the screen is few examples where Gen AI is already there in analytics, right? Specifically on like the data and insights part of it. I've just given a couple of examples here where Tableau, I know they've been working on this for the last few years. If you've been to this year's Tableau conference, the main emphasis has been AI-powered insights to scale data at like a scale that you've never seen before, right? Tableau had like Tableau Pulse introduced, Einstein Copilot to be able to author data visualization, transform data, with an AI assistant. You've seen like data chat applications. You have augmented analytics where you can like do natural language interaction, predictive analytics with Gen AI. And you also see a little bit of like how the Tableau's Pulse architecture works, in terms of contextualizing data to automating data patterns detection, and then the enrichment of the data source, and then in turn it boosts the insight delivery. So these are things that are already there. So this is an example from the previous slide where we talked about embedding intelligence in the software, right? So Tableau has done it, like Power BI has done it, data chat, and so many applications. Or Snowflake is giving that capability. So a lot of these applications have built the AI into their model, and also, right, most of them are available on cloud to scale. So this is the next generation that we are already seeing there, from the time we had Chat GPT a year and a half ago to company-wide, enterprise-wide applications having Gen AI capabilities. We already seen like Copilot and other like Chat GPT kind of models already integrated into enterprise suite. So this is taking that supercharged into data and analytics. So this is going to be a game changer altogether. Here is another quick roundup of Gen AI tools that I've worked in the past. That is the whole embedded intelligence, embedded AI into your common day-to-day applications, right? Whether it's like building a semantic layer, building a data governance model, building data visualization, building ML models, or like, hey, building simple data, data layers. These tools have helped elevate the game, and then they're pushing the boundaries. This is not an all-inclusive, comprehensive list, but again, quick roundup of different varieties of tools that's going to, level the field in terms of what the organizations, big and small, are able to do. And that's going to be a big game changer, right? Gone are those days where you have to spend millions of dollars trying to, license a server, get application license to be able to run data analytics. You can just buy licenses on the cloud, and then still be able to run your business and scale it with like little to no investment, right? So, and then these investments, marginal investments, is going to pay for itself, in the first few months, 2 years, because this is how the organizations are able to scale with more modern cloud-based tools, and Gen AI is already being a part of this. So feel free to look at it, provide comments on the tools that your companies are using. But I feel like this is like kind of like worth to look at. And then I've included some reference materials that I've used to help build and deliver this insights to you. And a lot of these are like key takeaways for you to read and kind of like absorb good takeaway. So let me stop right here for any questions. But it's been so wonderful to share my insights about data and analytics and analytics center of excellence, how Gen AI is already a game changer here. So it's a wonderful journey.
Thank you so much, Karthikeyan, for sharing your knowledge. You might already see from the comments and all the thumbs that are going up that I think a lot of people really, really like your session. I also thought it was a very, very informative session. We're running a little bit late, but there were so many questions coming in, 11 in total. So we definitely don't have time to answer all of them, but I'm going to pick a few that have received the most upvotes from everyone who's listening. And I'm going to get started with the question from Katina. And let me project that on the screen so that you can see it as well. The question here is, how are you measuring the success of all your data democratization efforts and initiatives?
Yeah, that's a very good question, right? So, in terms of measuring the success of data democratization, there are a couple of levels where you can actually be able to monetize and be able to analyze their performance, right? There are basic checks here, right? Like whether, like, hey, your organization, how many users have access? How many users are like data novice, like the data profile that I talked about, right? In terms of like your user personas, having those metrics categorized based on your user personas, your users access, and your users levels is the standard format, right? That's your first level for data democratization. The second level is going to be how data literate they are, right? In terms of like, how is their data knowledge, right? Whether they are a new practice implementation, where they are like, making an impact on the existing projects, and whether they are like data contributors, or whether they are like, data, what do you call, data security experts, or whether they are like data visualization experts, where they are in terms of like the data consumption and adoption. Those kind of metrics helps you put a tag towards like measuring the success of the data democratization, right? How far, how wide, and how deep the data reaches, those metrics are the one you should be able to track in terms of data democratization. And then don't forget data security, governance, infrastructure, and the data culture can also be used as a metric to derive where your organization is in terms of data democratization, right? So you need to go far and wide to be able to quantify those qualitative metrics in these different buckets that help elevate the game to the next level.
Thanks so much for that. I think that's a very good answer to the question. I see thumbs are going up, so I'm quite sure they're agreeing as well. Another quick question is from Ame Gill, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. It says, do you have any advice on how to implement data quality practices for data teams? Asking since clients often ask about data quality in order to trust the data. And I think this is such an important question that I kind of wanted to highlight this.
Yeah. So again, there is always the key challenges with data quality, right? You have increased regulation, you have lack of resources, inconsistent data. But the biggest thing, two things I see is lack of ownership, right? Who owns the data, right? Again, most often times it's easy to say that IT owns the data, but technically not true, right? We own the infrastructure for the data. If it's a sales data, it's the sales leadership team that actually owns the data, right? Because they are the one who defines those metrics and KPIs to say like, hey, this is our sales numbers that we are putting it out to the Wall Street, or we are doing it to our investors, presentation. So having the data ownership is the key in order to enable, right? When there is lack of ownership for data, then the whole implementation of data quality practice kind of goes out through the window.
Absolutely. So ownership, I think that's a very strong piece of advice. Good, then I'm going to move to the absolute last question. And this one also received a lot of upvotes, so that's why I'm doing this one, which is coming from Ryan. And Ryan is asking, while generative AI sounds powerful for non-experts, how can we address concerns around potential biases in the data models connected to these tools?
Oh, that's a very good question, because two things I also mentioned is like the one is the bias, and then the other is like the policy, right? So in order to eliminate the bias, one of the things you need to be really proactive is be able to build a policy, right? To be able to identify what is bias, how do we eliminate bias, having that core competencies, right? Because I'm like, hey, it's not just your bias in terms of ethical complications, right? There is also bias in terms of data privacy and security, dependencies, right? Intellectual properties and things like that, right? Hey, it's often easy to say like, hey, the data is going to be biased based on human, common biases, right? In terms of like gender, in terms of like, what do you call ageism and things like that. But the bias goes far and wide, right? Data privacy and security, what you think is data privacy and security may not be the same for Gen AI, right? What you think is regulatory compliance, what you think is intellectual property is not the same, right? For Gen AI, it can learn from a model and then it can absorb and then it can project it, thinking there is no implications on the intellectual property from where it learned, right? So you need to be able to lay a foundation policy where you show like, hey, these are the bias factors for the algorithm to be able to evaluate bias, aggregate it, rank it based on like index it, and then comes the behavioral bias, right? Contextual, like social and other bias, right? You need to be able to define it in different layers in order to be able to be successful implementing in an organization, right? So for non-experts, I would start with the basics and then move towards like, more on fine-tuning it for the enterprise-wide audience.
Thank you so much, Karthikeyan. I think that that's a great way to address this particular concern, which is something I think a lot of people are struggling with as one of the side effects of Gen AI. With that note, our time has come to an end. Karthikeyan, I would like to thank you on behalf of everyone at the Enterprise Big Data Framework for organizing this session. I think it was absolutely great. Shared a lot of very good insights for everyone. So thank you so much for being with us here today, and I already would like to invite you back for next year. Hope I will see you again during our upcoming Big Data Conference.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. You all have a wonderful rest of the
Thank you so
day.
much.
Thank you.
Speaking of rest of the day, our conference is slowly but surely moving towards a close. But we will have one final keynote for both sessions combined that will be the close of our day. And for that, we have no one else than Jordan Morrow, the Senior Vice President of Data and AI Transformation. And as many of you will know, he's also the author of 3 books on data, very popular books. During our next keynote, we will also give away one of those books. So you might be the lucky winner that will be receiving one of these publications. I've listened to Jordan a number of times, so I can really attest to the fact that this is a keynote that you don't want to miss. So stay with us, and in around 5 minutes, we're going to be starting our last and final session, and we're going to be looking at data and AI literacy. See you back shortly.